if I go to Union Station and I have a hotel that's, maybe a 15-minute walk, it literally will take me like 2 hours because I'm stopping every couple of feet like, ooh, ooh, ooh.
Hey, I'm Brie Stockwell. I'm a nature photographer, owner of Wild Woman Photography, leading co-ed creative photography retreats and workshops for women. And I'm also the host of this podcast, Wild Women in Photography. Today's guest is wild woman Beth Buelow. Beth is a Michigan-based artist, professional certified coach, and educator who specializes in abstract and minimalist photography. Her guiding creative philosophy is, if you're not amazed, you're not paying attention. She's the host of a new podcast, Pixels, exploring the heart and art of photography, which is focused on the artistic, philosophical, and ethical considerations of creativity. I'll include a link to the episode I recorded with her in the description of this episode. Beth is also the author of Introvert Entrepreneur, Amplify Your Strengths and Create Success on Your Own Terms. When not photographing, writing, coaching, or podcasting, she's exploring other visual art mediums and spending quality time with her husband, dog, and cat. You can find out more about Beth and her work at Beth Buelow, Buelow, photography.com. Now on to the episode with wild woman Beth Buelow. Let's go. Yeah, that's awesome. So a lot of the best stuff happens before we record. Just kidding. That's not true today. I was just...
The best is yet to come.
I was just complaining about getting older. Not
it's
really.
What we do when we get older. No.
I know. It just becomes a different challenge. It's just a different challenge. That's all.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Like a new different challenge. You're like, oh, this is what happens.
Plot twist.
Right. Oh my gosh. How often does that happen for us? The plot twist.
Every day. Every day.
I can't wait to see what your plot twist is today, Beth.
Oh gosh. Well, yeah. Me either.
Oh my goodness. That's so funny. Well, I was telling you about how I had to do some coaching on myself, and that just reminded me how much I love these conversations with you. I've been on your podcast. I'll put a link to it in the notes of this one.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's always just fun to have these conversations with another coach. Will you just, before we move on to other things like photography stuff,
sure.
Tell us more about your coaching. Are you an executive coach? I'm trying to remember now, what exactly that you do.
Sometimes I wonder what it is that I do.
I know you're I talk to people and that's it.
I talk to people. I'm an introvert that talks a lot. Yeah, well, I've been coaching for about 16 years now, which is very strange to say. And most of that time I've done entrepreneur and leadership coaching, and primarily working with introverts. So that was the lane that I chose to go down, because I am an introvert, and at the time there wasn't enough conversation about what it meant to be an introvert, and particularly an introvert in an extroverted situations like entrepreneurship and leadership, where even though there are plenty of folks that are introverted, it's dominated by extroverts, or at least the expectations are that everyone is extroverted. And I feel like between my work, the work of many others, we've moved the needle over the past 10 or 15 years. I used to share that when I started coaching introverts, I set up a Google alert on and I don't know if I assume Google Alerts still exist, but I set up a Google alert for introvert. And I would get these digests of where introvert was appearing on the web, and particularly in the media and news stories. And it was almost always something about a crime, something about somebody going off the rails,
Wow.
That sort of thing. And I always would say, like, the typical line was the police talked to the neighbor and the neighbor said they were really quiet. They kept to themselves. I think they were an introvert. And so that was always the
Like
context
you're
that it
hiding
showed
bodies
up.
in the basement. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So very much playing into those stereotypes. By the time I started phasing out that niche, the Google alerts were more how introverts can be successful leaders, 5 tips to doing that and 10 tips for that, and what you might be underestimating about introverts. So the pendulum swung into a more positive place. So I hope that maybe I had a contribution to that conversation that helped make that happen. But more lately, my coaching has been centered on mentor coaching, which is coaching other coaches to be better coaches. Because that's
We
just
love that.
part.
We need that.
We need that. That's part of our, I believe in professional rigor. Coaching is the wild, wild west.
Yes.
And we need to maintain ethics and standards and make sure that we are being responsible in the way that we are working with people. And so now that I've been coaching long enough, and I love mentoring, I actually love giving feedback. I feel like I found a new place where I can contribute to the profession in a different way. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to, and in the coaching realm. Yeah.
I think it's really beautiful. I think a lot of photographers can actually relate to this feeling of being introverted. I am
Mm-hmm.
obviously not one. However, I'll say something about that in a minute. But I think a lot of photographers can relate to being introverted. I've talked to so many that are like, oh, I'm an introvert. And so they spend time
Yeah.
alone, or at least nature photographers in general.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of maybe a struggle if you're like a portrait photographer or like a
Or
family
weddings.
photographer,
Yeah.
right? Weddings, and you're the introvert because all of a sudden you have to like approach people and talk to people and tell people what to do. And I think there is totally a space for learning how to be your introverted self and like manage
Mm-hmm.
the energy around what you give and what you take in and all of those things. I mean, I've not coached on that, but it would be, and I'm not saying, like when you coach on something more, you really learn like the nuances of it. So you can
Yes.
like help all the people, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But I think what's so interesting is that when we have an idea, there's lots of other people in the collective also having the same idea, and
Mm-hmm.
right, which was why like you contributed to that. And then I think there must have been all these other people that saw the need for this, and so they were also doing that too. And so it
Yeah.
came people from like multiple angles, and we see this, like
Mm-hmm.
we see this happening in all kinds of different places, right?
Yeah. Well, and we see somebody doing it and it gives us permission. And it's not that
Mhm.
they need permission, and we might not even know that we were looking for it, but sometimes just seeing somebody else do something, it's like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
I can do that too. And I think that goes to there's that famous Marianne Williamson quote where, when we shine our light, we give others permission to shine theirs. I'm totally
Mhm.
slaughtering it, but you know what I'm saying.
Same sentiment.
Yeah, the sentiment that when we, yeah, when we see others doing brave things, different things, it opens up something in us in terms of possibility. Um, and I wanted to, two things came up as you were sharing there. One is I was just having a conversation with another photographer, and she was mentioning that a lot of the photographers she knew come from engineering and
Mm.
IT. And I said, okay, so that's starting to put together why there are so many introverted photographers, because they're coming from these fields that, I don't like to generalize, but that do seem to have a pretty heavy introvert contingent. So it kind of makes sense that that's the case with a lot of photographers you talk to, and
Yes,
and I find it
totally.
I find the people thing interesting because, like, on my LinkedIn profile, I'll say photographer of subjects that don't talk, and I've sort of have some nuance around that because one thing I do love to photograph is candids of people. And so,
Same,
you
actually,
know,
same.
I don't want, if you make me pose people, I'm like, oh God, and I don't know what to say. Like, okay, here we go,
And
Um,
people
eh,
turn out awkward if you've ever tried it. Like,
yeah. Oh,
I'm
one of
like,
the,
like,
yeah,
I'm like,
one of
oh
the
my gosh, they don't look right.
Yeah, I know. And yeah, one of the best, I do candid like events. So I call it like candid casuals where I'm setting the expectation. Yes, I will do some casually posed groups, but don't, put pressure on like, this is a formal shot where everybody has to be perfect kind of thing. And I find as I'm processing those photos, like I'm smiling. So I'll catch myself like, it's kind of sweet. Look at those faces. Look at the way that they're having fun or whatever it is. So that's been kind of a surprise. And I think
Mm,
that part of the reason I was drawn to photography in the first place was because it is an instrument to connection. So rather than thinking about like it being a barrier between me and people, it gives me a role. It gives me a purpose when I'm around people. And it actually makes it easier for me to approach them. It makes it easier for me to talk to them. And and I think that there's something about being an introvert that makes others more comfortable because I'm not in their faces. I'm actually trying to be sort of melting into the background, don't notice me kind of approach. And I think that people sense that, and they sense that
yeah.
it's safe to be relaxed, even if somebody is standing there with a camera. So a long little, digression there, but it's just been something interesting that I've noticed about me and my relationship to photography and how it has supported me as an introvert in being more extroverted.
That is so interesting. That's fascinating. When you were talking about making the connection with people with your camera, I was imagining that for myself, and I was like, "Oh no, the camera is actually a barrier for me."
Hmm.
Because isn't that fascinating? Because
Hmm.
I I just want the people to person connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Straight
Yeah.
up. Like, straight up.
Hmm.
I don't want anything in the way. And so it's just so interesting that, and I think we can use how we feel, like whether we say we're introverted or extroverted, we can use that to our advantage and figure out where the strengths are in those things so that we can be our best selves in different situations. Because I don't like going places and feeling like, oh, I'm so uncomfortable here, like what am I supposed to be
Yeah.
doing? How do I
Yeah.
manage this?
And the camera for me gives me a purpose and gives me a role. And it's like,
Mhm.
I know what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I do that. And, and to me, it facilitates that person to person. Like I'm thinking about I think it was the last time I was in Chicago. I love to just take the train down to Chicago for the day and photograph all day, catch the train coming back. And, excuse me, I'd stopped in front of, I'm going to forget the name of the installation, the art installation at the base of Willis Tower. It's like waves. And I was taking some photos, and there was a security guard who was just kind of hanging out on the sidewalk, and he started asking me questions. First he's like, "Have you been up in the tower?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Oh, you should really go up there. It's beautiful. You can." And I said, I asked him some questions about it. He started talking about how he loved to photograph. And so, we had this lovely, maybe 10-minute conversation that I never, ever would have had if I
Mm.
hadn't had my camera with me. So that's where I am appreciating that brings me, it brings me those person to person opportunities that I don't think would have been there otherwise, because I wouldn't have just started walking up to him and saying, "Hey, what's it like up there?" I need the camera.
That's so funny. Because that's so interesting. I love this so much because I kind of classify myself as an extrovert. But I'm finding that when I'm alone, I just want to be me. Like I just want to connect with who I am. And so my photography for me has been a way to connect with myself because
Mhm.
I think because I put so much out there all the time, it's like it's like outward facing versus internal. And so
Mhm.
when I have my camera and people come, I'm not saying don't interrupt me when I'm photographing
Right,
with y'all.
right.
Okay. So I'm not saying that, but I find more often, like if I was in your place making photos and someone came up to me, I'd be like, I'm having my moment right now.
Yeah.
Just go. Even though I love talking to
Yeah.
people, I'd be like, and I'm
Yes.
interrupted, you know? And so it's
Yep.
just, it's so interesting that that is how it works. And I am actually so, I'm so curious why, like, and it's not, I don't actually need to know why, but like more and more, I enjoy spending time alone.
Mhm.
And I always
Mhm.
thought I like needed to be around people to like have so much fun. And it's just really enjoyable to be with myself. I find like
Yeah.
I crave more of it. And I don't think I'm an introvert
Mhm.
necessarily, but I feel like I'm feeling myself shift
Yes.
between the two. I'd never be an introvert, never. But maybe I'm a little bit more on the ambivert side now,
Right.
you know what I
Right.
mean? And so I find that fascinating. And I think that we can shift as,
Yes.
we shift into different stages. We have new ideas. We, grow, develop on all those things.
Yeah, that was often a question that would come up is like, can you change over time? And I don't know that it's necessarily changing because we all have introvert, we all have extrovert in us.
Hmm.
I've actually taken, besides the Myers-Briggs, where I have always consistently over the course of 20 or 30 years been an introvert. I took a Big Five assessment and came out like 94% extrovert. And so that was really fascinating. And so it's like this reminder that we're all on a spectrum, and part of it's how
Hmm.
you define introvert and extrovert. I think of it as energies as opposed to like personality, because I think personality is like the external face you give to the world, whereas your energy is something that's more, internal to you,
Right.
and your relationship to it can shift. And so there's, I don't have anything except anecdotal evidence that often extroverts they will not become introverted, but they get in touch with their introvert energy. Their introversion becomes more a part of who they are. They are wanting to honor it more. The extroversion that we do when we're younger is often driven by, I'm figuring out who I am in this world.
Hmm.
I'm figuring
I
out
mean, we
what
all
I
still are
like.
all the time.
We are all the time. And
Yes.
as we mature, as we grow in wisdom, we're hopefully more self-aware. We don't need the reflection as much to figure out who am I, what do I believe, what do I need, what makes me different. All of those questions that we're asking ourselves in the beginning, we grow in that awareness hopefully over time, and so we don't need that as much, and we also become just more discerning about how we're spending our time. And I would guess, that's probably true of our photography journey as well. In the beginning, you're maybe putting it all out there, you're needing all of that feedback and all of
Or the
the,
opposite, you're doing
or,
none of it. Like you're
or
making photos, you're not sharing anything, you're
you're not sharing
wondering.
anything
Yeah.
because you're worried about like the
Hmm.
external world.
Hmm.
But as you get more confident with it, it's not as much about like responding to everything around you and needing that feedback. You become more confident in your own, and trusting in your own vision. And so it's not as important that you have hordes of people giving you this validation or
Right.
engagement.
I have found it an interesting journey to um like enjoy my own photos, see them as something that's like my own beautiful art,
Hmm.
and be able to go, oh yeah, and this is take it or leave it. This is my vision for now, put it out there. And also want to improve. I think so
Hmm.
often
Yeah.
we think if we don't like beat ourselves up, we won't necessarily improve or like, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so um And so it's been interesting to see that shift for me, that this is where I am now. And this is this photograph of this place now. And I'm interested to see what happens the next time. Like, I'll be a different
Yeah.
person. I'll be a different photographer, right? So great
Yep.
to go back to the same places so that you can experience them as you, I love what that you said, like grow in wisdom in yourself and in your photography. I think that's
Yeah.
really fun.
Yeah.
What are your favorite places?
Oh gosh, so many. I had an MRI yesterday and I was going to all those happy places in my mind as the machine was
That sounds
clicking
like
around me. So this is actually a fresh question because I was just thinking about that. Chicago,
yeah.
because I do love, that's where I first really found my love of architecture photography and especially abstract architecture photography. I mean, really, that's where that's definitely a happy place. And so any place where I can go where there's, fabulous architecture, but Chicago is definitely a happy place. Death Valley, just like for a lot of landscape and outdoor nature photographers, Death Valley is another one. I've gotten to go twice.
It's the U.S.
And
Mecca. I
it
know.
is. It draws us.
I saw your photographs of that, and I was like, "That's not Death Valley," but it's.
I like that.
I know, but I like going, "Oh, that's what she made there. That's way different than what I would have seen." And I just love that, because if we were standing side by side, pointing our cameras in similar directions, we would have made totally different images. And that's just really fun. Death Valley. Anywhere there's like dunes and interesting deserts where I feel like where the earth is really raw and bare. It's an interesting, like, it's a place where you can like really spread your creative wings. Because there's like not necessarily like one subject to point at.
Right. It's everywhere if you are really open to it. Like, match the openness of the landscape with the way you're seeing things. I love botanical gardens, for like the smaller abstract nature scenes. Chicago Botanic, of course, is amazing. We have Fred Meyer Gardens, which is maybe a 45-minute drive for me. And I could spend a couple hours just in the greenhouses around the succulents and just having all sorts of fun with that. And going to, I guess beaches, the opposite of Death Valley, I suppose, water. Any place where there's a river or a lake or the ocean. So much richness to be found in exploring that kind of landscape. So those are some of the ones that come up as just places that I love.
I love that you. How far are you from Chicago?
It's about a 3.5-hour drive. So I usually take the Amtrak. So I drive 45 minutes, get on the train for about 2.5 hours, and I get dumped at Union Station, which is perfect.
Fun.
9 a.m. Hop on it again at 6:30 p.m. It's a long day.
Yeah.
But it's a very efficient way to do Chicago.
That's so fun. I love that. Will you tell us about, you said I discovered architecture photography on a solo Chicago trip. Was this like a multi-day, or was this one of those like one and done?
Yeah.
Tell us about your discovery of this, because I think this is so interesting when we have like the things that we like, and then all of a sudden something new is open to us. That feeling is like, it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. I went for, I want to say it was like a 2.5-day trip. So I went by myself. I stayed overnight. I took the train. It was the end of December. So it was like, I think I was there December 27th through the 29th.
That's hardcore, girl.
Cold. It was cold. And
wait, hang on a second for our audience. Ooh. Chicago is cold because it's near a lake, and there's a lake effect that comes off the lake. It's not just cold there.
It's wet.
Like, bone chilling cold. Like, I know
Yeah.
that in like deep winter, you cannot be unexposed for
Right.
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Like it's bad. It's bad. Okay. But
Yeah.
December, maybe not so much, but still very cold. Okay.
Still very cold, and in the city, and I got, the fingerless gloves that had little caps on them to keep my fingers from
Yes.
getting too numb and whatnot. And the last day I really couldn't go out because it snowed and slushed, and I did not have appropriate footwear. So I ended up just like, bopping around and staying out of the slushy sidewalks. But anyway, I think back, and I don't know that I knew what I wanted to photograph when I got there. I
Mm-hmm.
just knew I wanted to go to Chicago. And I remember very distinctly, I'm walking down, probably Adams or one of the streets that's somewhere between Union Station and Lake Michigan. And I see, all of a sudden I see a building, and I'm like, those lines are really cool. And I try to take it, I'm trying in my camera to get the perspective to be straight. And I just can't do it. I'm like, no matter what I do, it's warped, right? And I was new to all of this, so I didn't, I thought there must be a way.
You
And
have like a 12 millimeter lens on.
there's something, I actually, what I had was what was it? It's like a 28 to 270 or something like that. It's like a Tamron Zoom thing. Anyway, and I was getting frustrated, and so I tilted. I'm like, well, if I can't get any straight lines, I'll just make sure that it's no straight line. Like there's no way, right? That's when I started, like, it clicked. Like there was something that said, oh, wait a minute, that's even cooler than trying to take it, straight on. And of course, later I had a mentoring session with Angie McMonigal, which, if you have any interest in architecture photography, you have to follow her. She's an awesome teacher and photographer, and very generous. And she taught me about, the grid, the lines in Lightroom and Photoshop and all that. So now I know how to straighten a scene. But at the time I didn't. And so then I became obsessed with, like, ooh, and I was seeing it everywhere. And then I was seeing, it's like where I learned to see things in a compressed way. That it was, I don't know how else to describe it. Just, being able to take in the totality of what I was seeing and put it together in a way that, to me at least, was interesting. And so that was like the foray into abstract architecture, and I absolutely love it.
That is so good. You
And now it
said
takes
something.
me. Yeah, well, I was going to say real quick, if I go to Union Station and I have a hotel that's, maybe a 15-minute walk, it literally will take me like 2 hours because I'm stopping every couple of feet, like, ooh.
This is why we can't take people with us.
Exactly. This is where I am a solo photographer. I don't do well when I'm photographing with others, even another photographer.
Well, there's two parts of this. So one is that you felt like you should go to Chicago. And I love that as like creatives, we listen. That for me has been huge, to listen to the intuition, say, that's where you want to go, and then go, and then honor it and go, right? Not just be like, oh, that's later, right? Honor it and go. And then also when we're in the process of it, being able to not be allowing the flow. You said on my sheet, you like my form, that you love the flow. And I love that too. It's when we don't have someone else saying, hey, we got to keep moving or whatever, like, so that we can just be in the flow that we want, where our intuition like just leads us. And I love when I'm in the flow and I'm not even noticing that intuition is saying, go here. It's just pulling me along by a little thread. It's not a rope because I don't feel
No,
pulled.
no.
It's like a little magic thread. And then when I'm done after a couple hours, I'm like, what in the magic just happened?
I
Right.
love that. I'm going to use that. What in the magic just happened? Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you want it to feel really good and you know
Hmm.
that well, I don't always know that I'm making good photographs, but like I think in the moment that it's happening and then I have to like
Hmm.
and actually when I have had those kind of moments, it takes me a little while to give myself my own feedback because I really liked the experience so much. I don't want to
Yeah.
tie them together with
Mm.
like
Mm.
having to make some judgment calls about what to keep and what to leave and all of that stuff. I like want it all to be good. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I could decide that, but still.
Well, that's the I hadn't thought about it exactly this way before, but it was intuition that took me to Death Valley, I think, um,
Mm,
because I had heard Sarah Marino talking about it. And I
yeah.
loved her story where she was
Yes.
like, I think it was her in-laws or her parents or somebody said, "We're going to Death Valley. Do you want to come?" And she's like, "Well, why on earth would I want to go there?" And now she's been, dozens and dozens of times and hiked every trail and loves it. And so when I heard about that, I'm like, oh, that sounds, and her images, of course, were stunning. And so later when I saw that TJ Thorne and Alex Noriega were doing a Death Valley workshop, this was in January of 23, I signed up immediately. And here's the thing though, that it was only later that I realized as they started sending correspondence that they kept calling it a landscape photography workshop. And I'm like, oh, damn. Landscape photography. I'm not a landscape photographer.
I do
You know,
architecture and
I do architecture and
flowers.
small scenes
Yeah.
and succulents and
Hmm.
abstract anything. I don't know how to, and so I signed up for it because of Death Valley and because of the instructors, not really thinking about like what is the focus of it. And of course, landscape is all the things that
Hmm.
it's even architecture, because nature has an architecture. It has
Right.
lines and form and shape and angles and light and all of that. So, but it was kind of funny to me that I had this slight panic because I was like, oh God, everybody's going to be a landscape photographer. They're going to expect landscape photography. I don't know if I can do that. But I went anyway. And yeah, it was one of the most transformative experiences. I still don't call myself a landscape photographer, but I learned about letting go of labeling myself
Hmm.
any particular kind of photographer, maybe, and that there's something in anywhere you go.
Yeah. TJ is really great at the like abstract, intimate,
Yeah.
those kinds of things. I bet he was like, "Who is this chick? Who
I
is
know,
this
I
girl?"
know.
And well, I feel like he would have been pleasantly surprised with
Yep.
your photography. How
He
fun.
was. He was. I consider him a mentor and a friend,
Hmm.
and just very grateful to both him and Alex for the way that they uh, held space in that workshop for people to be wherever they were with their
Hmm.
photography and to see what they saw and to help them, make whatever it was that they saw even better. So lots of respect for both of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. I think they're amazing. I love that you just said, you know, helping people see what, like make what they saw even better, or when you're in their space, you kind of like he's seen things because I did the out of Chicago Death Valley, and I'm like, what in the heck is TJ seeing? Like he showed me this image, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, there's no way I would have seen that. Like no
Yeah.
way. And that's kind of the fun of photography. I love that you wrote in here that that's one of the things that you love to do. It's significant for you is sharing what you see with other
Mm-hmm.
people who can't see it. And
Yeah.
like when I look at your photographs, I'm like, what is that? I mean, that's not a thing that I would see. Will you just tell me more about that experience? Like, what is that like for you? Do you do that like in person, or is that more of like
Mhm.
sharing your images, or is it both? Like, you know what I
I
mean?
think it's
Digitally
kind
or
of
whatever.
both. Yeah, I think it's
Mhm.
kind of both. And I think that's the other way that having the camera, especially out and about, connects me with people because they'll see me pointing my camera someplace that is unusual. And they'll ask
The
me
opposite of the sun.
the opposite of the sun or
Right.
into the
Right.
sun or at
Whatever.
a facade. And it was funny when I went to a Chicago architecture workshop with Angie McMonigal, and there was a small pod of us, like 6 or 7, and of course, we're moving around. We're all pointing our cameras up at the buildings, and people would stop and they'd say, "What are you looking at?" Because they couldn't see it. And some people were like, "Is there a celebrity there?" We're like, "Is that the
Yes.
only thing that would draw your attention is a celebrity?" But I do love it when people are like, "What are you seeing?" And I'll say, "Well, okay, look up here and you see the way that shadow is casting here, or that there's an overlap, or the light or reflections are a big one that people just kind of you zone out, you don't notice, but I see those reflections and I'm like, oh my gosh." And it's so fun when they look and they're like, "Oh yeah, I would not have noticed that." And then I'll show them on the back of my camera, and oftentimes the photo on the back of the camera is, it's not
You
great,
can't
but
necessarily tell.
you can't really tell. But, I do like showing them, or look through the viewfinder and see for yourself. And then they'll like, "Oh, okay." And then they'll take a photo and then they'll move on. And it just makes me happy to know that, somebody is interacting and engaging with their environment in a new way. Because we do, especially in maybe big cities, we kind of just sort of sleepwalk through. Like we stop seeing things after a while. And if I'm able to, support somebody in noticing something different, I can't help but think that that's going to support them in seeing other things differently in the future. Like maybe they're going to be more noticing of reflections the next time they're in a particular place. Maybe they're going to notice the light in a different way. Maybe they're going to notice lines.
Mm.
And I think that anything that makes us more aware and appreciative, my my sort of guiding mantra is, if you're not amazed, you're not paying attention. Because if you're paying attention, there's nothing that is not amazing
You're
about
speechless?
our world. Your speech, yeah, I'm like, what is it? Yeah, there's nothing that's not amazing. And we have so much heaviness in our world. We have so much that we criticize and beat up on and degrade. And I'm not talking about rose-colored glasses and Pollyanna and trying to ignore what's broken or what's wrong. It's just that we need that counterbalance. We need to have that amazement and that joy. See, you've got your rose-colored glasses right
I
there.
do. My daughter gave them to me.
I
I
love
have
it.
them right here, and I'm like, "That's right, I do have rose-colored
Perfect.
glasses."
That's perfect. Yeah, we need both. We need it all.
I know.
Because
I
in order to
agree.
deal with the despair, we need the amazement.
Yes. Yeah, 1,000%. Like I was she gave this to me. She's like, "Mom," not that I like need like extra happy, but I was really focused on uh love. Anyway, it's a personal we Oh, on your podcast I said I am love. Remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. I
So it's
do.
still a focus for me because I think we the
Yeah.
world needs more of it, and so
Yeah.
that's something that I'm working on is having more of that in the world, and I love it. And what I realized is I have these sunglasses that have a little bit of violet pinky tint to them,
Mm-hmm.
and so when I'm walking through the landscape, I see everything like
Rosie.
just bumped up a little bit, like
Yeah.
on that slider, so it's like a little
Mm-hmm.
bit less green, and I love it. So I realized, why do I why do I shift all my images? Like when I'm on my computer without them, I shift the images. And it's because I wear them while I'm out there.
Mm,
And it's
all your
been
color
really fun to
perception.
act, right? It's been fun to actually see the world with some rosy colored glasses because like I feel better. I wonder like how it affects other people, you know?
Mhm.
And that is interesting. And we do need more of the surprise, of the awe, of the like wonder that we have around us versus some of the, I mean, at the time of this recording, we're leading up to
Yes.
the election, and
Yeah.
I like want to hide from the internet right now. Like, I'm
Yeah,
just like,
there's so much
yeah.
anxiety. It doesn't matter who you hope wins or whatever. We are
Mhm.
all feeling a high level of anxiety, and that's not sustainable. You know, we
No,
can't be in
it
constant
isn't.
fear. And so that's why I come back to, if I ever question art, photography, beauty, is it just trivial? Is it frivolous? Is it necessary? It's like, it is absolutely essential. There's just no question. We have to have it. And in times of war, whether it was World War II, Japanese internment camps, all of the atrocities that happen in the world over time. When you read the writings of people that were there, they share about how they made art, how they made music, how they put on little plays,
Mhm.
how they had to find these different ways to express themselves and to connect with one another and find meaning in what seemed like a completely hopeless situation. And so it's and even music for political dissent. It's 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 part of being human, that we
Yes,
cannot relegate to a luxury or a frivolity. We are contributing something really important to the world through our work.
agreed. Um, what you said made me think back to earlier this year. I was in Lone Pine, California, and so Manzanar is one of the Japanese internment camps from, is it World War? No, it's World War One, right? World
I
War
think
Two.
so. I should know my history better, but
I should know my history better because I went there. I'm just trying to figure out the year, you know.
mhm.
But so Chuck Kimmerly took us, he like talked to a group of us and took us around and was like, "Hey, Chuck, you want to come in my car?" And he was like, "Okay." So, because his wife was a superintendent there, I think superintendent. Anyway, she's not there anymore, but so he knew a lot about it. And so he was like, over here is this thing. And it's so interesting. It was an interesting place to photograph because it's like, it's, the structures have now melded into the landscape as nature takes over eventually, but you
Right,
can still see
right.
the outlines of their gardens. Like even when they were there,
Hmm.
you're not just in the buildings. They made art. They made their art. They made
Yeah,
gardens, and that, I mean, that Japanese gardens are beautiful art,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it was their place of. I could see how not just they're beautiful, but it's their place of like peace. It's
yes,
meaningful, right? And
yeah,
having that space in what feels like a little bit of chaos, some oppression, that place where you can just go and feel different
hmm,
and connect with yourself, connect with something higher. I
yeah,
think all of that's really important. So however you can get it, but I love seeing that, like, we're human. We're going to do this no matter what. Like
yeah. You can't
we are
stop
going to,
us.
yeah, you can't stop us. You
No.
can't,
Mm-mm.
and I just think that's really beautiful to see that, to see that happen, to see that shine, to see that that was like a priority for them in
Yes.
where they were
Yeah.
at. Yeah.
Yeah. In the face of atrocities,
Yeah.
we are that urge to create is yeah, you can't stamp that out.
No, not at all. Tell me, so I think it's fun. I've seen your new in your photography, you just seem like you play a lot, like a lot. You're like, I'm just going to turn
Yeah.
my camera sideways. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to go to Death Valley and take photos and make images. You're not going to know what it is. It's real. You guys, her work is really beautiful. How many times have I said that, Beth? I don't know. I love your work. Okay.
You can always say it more. I'm good with that, but yeah.
Beth,
thank you.
let me just drip on the compliments.
Yeah.
I have no shame.
I don't, and I don't need validation at all. No, never.
No. But it still feels good to hear. So, but what I love is you put on here iPhone Amish capture. I have no idea what that means. And I want to say, like, I think my phone has been a really fun way to play.
Yeah.
And some people are only phone photographers. Okay, the iPhone isn't the only phone, but it says has some great qualities like that, things that iPhone can do. So this is where I'm like, tell me how you played with this. The Amish.
Yeah.
I've spent time in Amish country. There's a bird in hand. You guys, there's a place in Pennsylvania called Intercourse. Like there's all kinds of
nice,
things, right? It's probably where the different roadways intersect. But anyway, it's fun. It's fun. It's an interesting like culture to be amongst. So tell me about this.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I want to come back to the word play in a minute. Because that's one that I've been thinking a lot about, and I'm about to do a podcast on that very word and idea. But the Amish thing, that was another Chicago, believe it or not. If anyone has spent any time going in and out of the Amtrak station in Chicago and Union Station, you always see Amish travelers. And that might be true. I think they do a lot on Amtrak. So I'm guessing that's, DC, New York, and all of that. But I had just done one of my days of walking around taking photos, and I had put my camera away because I needed to catch the train. And I remember thinking like, okay, Beth, you've got to stop, put the camera in the bag because you have to catch your train. And so I come into Union Station and the not patio, but whatever the outdoor space is in front of it. What is that called? I don't know. Anyway. And there's a line of Amish men with their back to me looking over the river. And there was something about their pose. Like they were all sort of facing different directions. Their legs were bent, their heads were this, they had their hats on. There was a little boy that, sort of had his leg up and, all this. And it was just, there was something about their pose that I was like, I couldn't pose them any better than this. So I had my iPhone. It was once they had RAW introduced. So I had the presence of mind, like tap the
Thank
RAW.
Goodness for that. I was like,
yes.
I was wondering if you had done that. Yes.
Yes. I had that presence of mind and I just fired off maybe like 5 or 6 shots real quick, and it's their backs. And I didn't even notice at the time that there was a little girl that was sort of in between them. And when I look at the photo of the building across the street, I can't tell if it's a cutout man or a real man, but there's a man looking back, right? That you can just barely see.
Oh, interesting.
And I knew when I looked at the photo, I'm like, that is so cool. And I am not a people photographer. We already talked about that. It's at least not in posing. But at that point, people rarely are in my photos, especially not architecture photos. And I'm working on that. But I loved this photo. And so I ended up submitting it for a juried exhibition at the local art museum here for their annual Michigan Contemporary Art exhibition. And it was accepted. And I was like, dang, I had an iPhone image accepted into a museum exhibition. and it was a reminder of all sorts of things. A reminder to just keep open, keep looking. If, the best camera you have is the one you have on you. We've all heard that. Yes, I had put my camera away, but if I had taken the time to get out my camera and the moment would have been gone. And so I just was like, okay, think fast, get it, and then go. And to not limit yourself in like what you're looking for, to, if I had said, oh, people, I don't do people. It's like, no, what drew me to it? There was something so organic about the way that they were standing there that I was like, oh, that is so cool. So to listen to that intuition, what's drawing your attention. And then, that, an iPhone photo can be in a museum. It's, and I had to like, I thought, do I tell people that's an iPhone photo, and I think I told a few people, and it actually ended up being a neighbor that bought the image. So it's 2 doors down in her house, which I love. But, on the one hand, I was sort of proud that it was an iPhone photo. And then I'm like, yeah, but do you tell people? Because does that change the way they see it?
Like yes and no, like they don't need to, but also I feel like in this context,
yes,
it's a really fun reminder that our phones are like just our phones, but they're also really great tools. So knowing, practicing with them so that we do know how to like quick get the settings and the things set up when we need to. That's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, I have to remember where's the raw, where's the this. I think I can, right? But you have to have that. It's like using your regular camera, your big girl camera. It's like it's like using your regular camera. You have to know where all the quick settings are so you can, get the photograph that you see. And so, but I just think it's a great reminder that yes, whatever you have available to you can totally work. And it can go, there's nothing just because it's smaller, just because there's less pixels, megapixels, maybe they're getting better all the time, like really amazing,
And I think I ran it through like gigapixel, and, I feel like if you zoom in, one of the guys, he has his hand on his hat and you look at it and you're like, that looks a little, you can tell that the resolution is lacking a little bit, but that's the other lesson that I took away from it. And I think that there've been a few videos from other photographers recently about like, stop the obsession with focus, everything being tack sharp and megapixels and perfection and all of this. You have to get to like, what is the photograph trying to communicate? What's the essence? What's the emotion? And I think, we've that's not a new message. It's just that we need to have it reinforced from time to time, because we can get into being hypercritical about ourselves, about our own photos, about other people's photos. And so I've allowed myself more recently to start sharing things that I feel like, okay, there are flaws in this, but do those flaws take away from, flaws, quote unquote. If they distract from the essence of the photograph, then that is something that I want to be thinking about. But if they don't, if they don't subtract from the story, who cares? Who cares?
Yeah. 100% or 1,000%. Totally. Oh my gosh, this has been so fun.
Yeah. Thank you I love these little trips down memory lane.
I know.
Because that's the other thing photography does. Like even in prep for this conversation, I'm looking through my catalog, like, what adventures have I had? And, I've had a lot. I'm not a storm chaser. I don't, haven't been caught in, haven't been chased by an animal, haven't, Right. None of that. My husband has been chased by a moose, but I have not.
Right.
And so, adventures look different for everyone. And,
absolutely.
And my adventures, I treasure, and I love that photography is one way of, I don't see myself as documenting things when I'm photographing, but if I look back at the body of work, I can see it's like I am documenting my life and the way I see the world and engage with the world. So that's the part that's like just for me. And it's so fun to go back and revisit all of that.
Yeah, I did that kind of recently. I have a I have a little collection in Lightroom where I'm like putting things in there, like through, kind of through my journey. And I'm like, this has been fun. And I agree with you. We do we're not just like document the people in our lives, but like our personal growth over time. Like we change and seeing that. And sometimes I change and I don't see it until later, until I look back and go, that's where it was. That was interesting. Right. So these are your adventures in intuition. You're not like getting chased by a bear. You're like adventures in intuition.
Exactly. I think an adventure is like, you don't know what's going to happen. And that can happen on a train trip to Chicago, to getting chased by a moose, to being in Death Valley and wondering what the heck you're doing there. So
I've been in that place. I've been there where I'm like, what am I doing here? Yeah. It's kind of a weird place to be, but also kind of fun that there's so much potential ahead of you.
Absolutely.
Oh, this was so good. Beth, I just want to have more conversations with you. So let's not be strangers.
Absolutely.
Let's figure out how to have more chats in the future.
I'm on board with that. Thank you, Brie.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. That's it. We're saying goodbye to Beth. I'm saying goodbye to you.
Bye.
Bye. Ready to elevate your photography? Go to wildwomanphotography.com for more details about co-ed retreats, women-only photography escapes, and personalized private mentoring. While you're there, you can also check out blog posts with episode transcripts and more. If you enjoyed this conversation, I'd love for you to support this podcast and all these incredible wild women in photography by leaving a review or sharing with a friend. Thanks so much for listening.